No mai, haere mai. Welcome to Cult Chat, the podcast where we talk about control, coercion, and all things cultish. I'm Dr. Caroline Ansley. I'm a medical doctor. As a child, I lived at the notorious Centrepoint community, and now I run a website that advocates for former Centrepoint children.
I'm Liz Gregory, and I lead the Gloriavale Leavers Support Trust. I've spent the last decade helping people exit Gloriavale and journeying with them and building new lives.
I'm Lindy Jacob. I'm a former member of the Exclusive Brethren, and I'm part of the Olive Leaf Network, an initiative that supports people leaving high-demand religious groups.
Come with us as we unpack the cult playbook, talk to leavers and experts of coercive and controlling groups, and call for Kiwis to cult-proof their lives.
Join us as we traverse the cultiverse.
A warning, this podcast contains references to subjects and discussions which may be difficult for some people to hear. Please take care of yourselves and your whānau when listening.
If you would prefer to watch this episode, head to the show notes and click on the YouTube link, Setting the Record Straight, Part A, Cult Chat, Episode 10. Hi girls, I'm so excited to have you here with us today. I've been working on a fantastic little project and I can't wait to share it with you. So what have you had your heads buried in?
Kaz here. I've been on TV this week. Nothing to do with cults. It's to do with the most exciting moment in my calendar of the year, which is the Broken River ski area cheese roll.
Oh,
and I know you guys thought that cheese rolling was only for Britons on some hill somewhere in the south of England, I expect, but no, in the Craigieburn ski areas in Canterbury, we chuck a big circle of cheese down a hill and we all slide down on our tummies to catch it. And Seven Sharp was there to catch the whole thing, and it was quite fun.
I loved it. I saw you were standing at the top with your glasses like you were really serious, but I didn't see you tumbling down the hill. Did you just throw your kids down?
I was there. No, my kids, my youngest son, he had a little bit of a tussle actually for the cheese. His arch nemesis wins every year, unfortunately. She's always winning. And he tried to get it off her, and I thought he was actually going to wrestle her on television, but no. He let it go and she won. It was
I'm really
fun.
surprised that you, from the medical profession, will get involved in something so blatantly stupid in terms of creating medical havoc. Like people break their legs and stuff doing that kind of madness.
The snow was quite soft. It's spring conditions. Maybe in July it wouldn't be so safe, but it's pretty soft. Yeah. So
okay,
we were all sliding on our stomach.
Brilliant. That's great. Well, obviously Lindy wasn't there to join you. What were you up to, Lindy?
No, I wasn't. Probably a highlight of the week for me was having our first night away with our little people in a bunch of years. So, yeah, the Grandies, we left them with the Grandies and hightailed it up the coast, and both turned up as you do and fell asleep for several hours. So that was the highlight for me. Complete opposite end of doing a cheese roll.
Oh, well, I'm kind of jealous, both of you, because I've literally potentially spent 50, maybe 60 hours with my head buried in this new video editing software, and I'm not a techo at all, but I learned that you can like YouTube, how to, and so wow. I've been using like audio programs, and the reason is because a couple of weeks ago, the Deputy Prime Minister was on The Nation. Rebecca Wright had her on and asked her some questions about Gloriavale, and she was a little taken back. She wasn't quite prepared to respond, but she did make a very foolish comment, which was, we had no indication the children at Gloriavale were unsafe. Well, of course, that got the telephone ringing. And so there was a good response. And so the following week, Rebecca Wright actually went to Parliament and she asked Chris Hipkins, Prime Minister. Then she went and asked the head of workplace relations, and then she went to Calvin Davis, Oranga Tamariki Minister, and so they gave answers that we were just shaking our heads. It was really infuriating. And then the phone rang hot and the messages came in from leavers when they watched it, and I thought, you know what, you can't leave bad comments that get out to the public to go unchecked. It's actually not okay. And so they clearly needed a bit more professional development. And so what I just put out this little post, one single post in our Leavers Updates group, said, look, if you've got any comment on this and you want to contribute, we'll just do a video compilation, send it off to the politicians and anyone else, and let's just help educate them. Well, I got 20 people. The phone rang, some did video clips, some rang in on the phone, and we had to collect up the audio. Some people wrote it, and so we had to transfer that into something that we could put on a YouTube clip. Actually, we had 5 contributors from inside Gloriavale as well. Of course, they were all like heavily disguised. Actually, we couldn't use their voices because even their mannerisms or even sometimes their lingo would be easily identifiable. So we've made it so that no one will get in trouble, but you'll know who they are because I've got subtitles across the bottom saying still living in Gloriavale. And so really it's just a response to politicians. They were dodging the questions big time. And so it's been a really massive project, but I feel really delighted to have completed it today. YouTube, it's up on YouTube. We've sent it off to a load of MPs, and today we're going to watch it together collaboratively, and we're going to comment. We'll watch good decent portion of it. We'll do say 15 minutes, we'll comment, we'll watch the next 15 minutes, we'll comment, and then there's a part 2. So we'll have a part 2 podcast bonus episode because there was so much to say, because the Leavers really decided to go all out and help educate the politicians. So why don't we listen in to the compilation and listen in to what the politicians had to say? They kind of got nailed to the wall by the journalists, so we do want to thank Rebecca Wright for her efforts. All right, team, here we go.
Bring it on. Good.
Well, last week we asked the Deputy Prime Minister whether the 350 children in Gloriavale were safe. We wanted to know if they were still being exploited for child labour, as 2 court cases have now found.
This week, another Gloriavale man was sentenced in Christchurch for historic violence and indecent assault charges. Peter Truss forced young girls to strip naked, pose sexually for photographs, and he beat them with a fence pipe. Gloriavale's leader, Howard Temple, is also currently facing historic sex charges, which he denies. So, after all of this, we went to Parliament to find out what the government is doing to ensure the safety of the children at Gloriavale.
Journalist Rebecca Wright from News Hub's The Nation asks the Prime Minister, Chris Hipkins, a few questions.
On Gloriavale, can you give us an update on the multi-agency response by the government? What is happening down there right now?
It's a tricky area because obviously there are some court proceedings ongoing, and I don't want to interfere in that. But where the courts have made decisions, we've got a multi-agency team which is being supervised by a group of ministers who are making sure that the findings of the court are actually being implemented by Gloriavale.
Former member Virginia Courage responds.
Yeah, actually, we took the government to court because they aren't doing anything. So I'm not sure why they're claiming that they've done all this, whatever this is. They've failed.
So are children being exploited for child labour down there now?
Well, the various ministries who are working with Gloriavale will be working to ensure that the rulings of the court are actually implemented. For children to be exploited in the way that the court has found that they have been. And so we need to make sure that the court's rulings are actually being enforced.
Current resident of Gloriavale sets him straight.
The government is saying that they are working to make sure that Gloriavale is complying with the court ruling. And I mean, have they done anything? Have they come in and said anything about what the girls do? Because if the girls are still just working and not being paid or anything, then it's not really complying with the court ruling.
2 former members respond.
I've heard from some of the young fellas themselves there. The young boys contracted thing is such a joke.
But yeah, all the girls I've talked to lately, they're saying, they're still overworked, definitely. They're not getting paid, they're not getting money, so, yeah. What I think is, if the government was going to do something about it, they would have already, but that's not to say they won't.
Back to The Nation's Rebecca Wright.
So a year later from that court's ruling, why can't you stand up there and tell us that children are not being exploited for child labour?
Like I said, the agencies that we've got going in there, I haven't got the most recent update from them, but the agencies that we've got working on that issue have been making sure that the court's rulings are being implemented.
Former member Hopeful Disciple puts the Prime Minister straight.
There's a girl that we know that was in a situation where she was given a job that she was not happy about and was made, there was no option as to whether she wanted to or not. And this was after the girl's case.
A current resident provides input.
It's not exactly like it used to be, but it seems to be pretty much just life as normal. They're trying to make life better for the girls and not overwork them and all that. But they're still working. They're not getting paid. What choice is there for them? The washing, cooking, sewing and all that needs doing. And that's what you do. Your only choice is to pretty much leave Gloriavale.
A former member responds.
Yeah, it almost seems like the government is taking any slight little indicative answer and they're just like, oh, yeah, so that's all good, we're covering ourselves. And yeah, they're doing the bare minimum too. They're not actually going the full hog. Gloriavale don't just want to go all out and say like, we need to change this, what's the best way to do it? They just get spotlighted on one issue and they're just, okay, we'll just sort of patch that up, and then the next issue we'll patch that up. Yeah, they just sort of patch things up to make it, just get across the line, so it ticks the box.
But can you tell me that children are not being exploited right now?
Well, I personally haven't gone to check, but certainly the agencies responsible are tasked with that job.
A current member of Gloriavale challenges the Prime Minister.
Chris said he's never been here. Well, that's obvious. It must be about time he turned up.
Melody Pilgrim, a Gloriavale leaver, has something to say.
I was like, so you're going to sit back and be comfortable and read your reports every few weeks, and you're going to let the leavers, the victims and leavers, supported by the Gloriavale Leavers Trust and an amazing group of lawyers, you're going to let them do all the hard work and fight it out in courts so you can sit up in your comfortable building and just read reports. Where is your sense of calling and duty? You're like missing the whole point of your position. Just so disappointed.
Workplace Relations Associate Minister Priyanka Radhakrishnan is questioned by Rebecca Wright.
We've got a cross-government response that is being led by the Regional Public Service Commissioner down here to ensure that there's work that is happening alongside the leadership.
Former member Faithful Disciple has something to say about that.
Some key words there. We're working alongside the leaders. Working alongside the abusers? What direction do you think they're going?
A current resident tells us what the leaders are really like.
The leaders haven't been kind, loving people. They've been abusive tyrants. Their way or get lost. For all that time living here, it's actually been quite horrible. It's actually kind of mentally traumatizing. Always kind of living in a state of fear of watching my back. Who's going to dog me in?
Former member Virginia Courage comments.
She said that they have an agency, multi-cross agency, that's working with the leadership. Why are you working with the leadership? So you're asking the leadership who has kept these people enslaved, imprisoned, isolated, you're working with them now to somehow, get some bargain or plan how they're going to free them?
Gloriavale leaver Melody Pilgrim adds her 2 cents worth.
You think the leaders are going to tell them what's going on and what's wrong in there? The leaders don't want to change. They've been forced to change because of the court cases. They're not going to tell them that there's still issues and problems that they can't actually work through. They're going to tell them that everything's fine and we'll just keep, taking a tiny mouse fight piece off at a time, and people just still getting exploited and abused in there.
A former member responds.
You cannot see what's wrong with a cult while you're in it. It's had a facelift, but it's still a cult at heart.
Back to Rebecca Wright.
So are those things happening, or, are those things happening right now? Do you know that Gloriavale is no longer exploiting children, for example, with child labour?
There's a fair bit of work with various government departments, including Oranga Tamariki, there to ensure that it isn't happening, and the reports that I've seen is that they are working constructively with government departments.
Former member Virginia Courage disputes this.
No. How can they be? They're denying it. They're appealing the court case.
Former member Serena Pilgrim. who was also a plaintiff in the girls' employment case, has something to say.
That's just crazy to me because they're once again finding a way to cheat the system, and that just goes to show they lie straight through their teeth about the fact that they're willing to change. They're not willing to change, and they'll always find a way to cheat the system. No matter what the government puts in place, they're always above that, and they'll always find a way around it in order to get what they want and still look like they're doing the right thing, but they're not.
Former members Virginia and David Courage add their insights.
They are not understanding some of the mechanisms of a cult. And a cult says one thing to a person in authority or someone who's watching them, and when they're behind their closed doors and all alone in their beautiful little valley tucked away somewhere remotely, they do exactly what they want. Why are they dealing with the leaders? These are the very people that have been found in court to be in control, to be teaching coercion and the spiritual manipulation. The leaders that have got those people entrapped there are now the people that are saying they're safe. That doesn't sound very logical and sensible to me.
That's like asking a slave owner if his slaves are all good. And of course a slave owner is going to say, yeah,
they're happy.
They're happy.
A former member tells it how it is.
I know, it can make you upset and, angry. It's sort of almost laughable at the same time too. The thing you've got to know about the leaders is that they'll do the bare minimum. They will do something, they'll do the bare minimum though. The fact is they plainly want things to carry on the way they have always been carrying on. And they don't actually want to change. They'll only change things that they will be forced to change. And I know that because I know how they think. I've grown up there my whole life. I know how they think, and I know what they say to other people in personal discussions about these things, and that's exactly how it is.
And now, how can you trust, I suppose, what is going on within that community, given its long history of what we now know as child labour and exploitation and possibly abuse?
Because, as I said, we've got a number of different agencies who are and have been working with them for now over a year to ensure that some of those bottom lines are met.
Former member Virginia Courage has deja vu.
I love it how the government's saying that they've got reports and bits of paper. It kind of gives you a bit of a replay of when they signed, I think, their policies for the charities services. And I remember the current overseeing shepherd then, Hopeful Christian, holding up the document at a public mealtime and saying, oh well, this is just pieces of paper. We'll carry on and do what we need to do.
Associate Minister Priyanka Radhakrishnan talks about her pieces of paper.
And by all accounts that I receive 6 weekly reports from the Regional Public Service Commissioner, and I can see that there is a will to change from what I've heard. A will to change. A will to change.
Former member Virginia Courage is amused by that.
A will to change. Is that why we heard in the court case, we're not doing anything wrong? Yeah.
A person inside Gloriavale wants you to know the truth.
They're only changing anything because they're forced to, not because they actually believe that anything was really bad. I just think agencies just don't really want to do anything. They don't really want to get tough on them. They just come in and do stuff. But it's not like they can change it without shutting it down.
Former member Serena Pilgrim speaks again.
The only reason they're willing to change now is because the government's actually, turning around and saying there has to be change. It's not them wanting the change, it's actually that the change has to now happen.
Gloriavale leaver Victory Disciple adds her perspective.
So all of these physical changes are actually not real changes because they're not coming from a heart of, yes, we want to give these people their life, we want to give them choice, we want to give them independence, we want to give them individuality. None of it is for that reason. It's only we want to get the government off our backs. We don't want them coming in here every day. What we want them to see is this a good, wholesome, thriving community of happy people. And yet it's not. because all of those little changes do not change the underlying beliefs that their life is not their own.
A former member contributes.
And they could change things faster if they wanted to. But the fact is, they don't want to change. That is the truth. They say, yeah, we'll have change and we'll make changes. But the fact is, I know just about every single change that has happened in the last couple of years had to be forced on them one way or another. They did not voluntarily change anything. They were made to do it. I don't believe they want abuse in there, but they don't want to change anything in their way of life.
Back to the interrogation.
Have they changed?
It's a process, and that is what I'm saying. It's a process. It's a process.
Former members Virginia and David Courage had something to say about that one.
Can I laugh at that one? It's a process.
If it's a process. If Gloriavale wanted to change, it would change overnight. If they wanted to change, they would stand up and say, this is now what we're doing. It won't be a process. That is the process in Gloriavale. When the leadership says we're doing something, that's what's happening. A process.
A current member of Gloriavale responds.
Man, when she said changes are happening for a year now and it's a process, it could have been Howard speaking, because honestly, those are his exact words to us over and over, and we're just like, so change it.
Former member Virginia Courage tells us how change really happens at Gloriavale.
Just like that. They would stand up with a public announcement, and it could be a 180-degree turn on a topic or a policy or some belief that they've held, and it would just be boom, implemented that moment. No discussion. This is what we're doing.
Former member Victory Disciple speaks.
When I watched it, I felt like it was a reporter talking to the Gloriavale leaders all over again. Well, they just say whatever they can to get the pressure off them right then in the moment. The leaders will always have a front of, yes, we're changing, we're being responsible. But to the people, they never are. They turn around to the people and say, no, we can't do this because this organisation won't let us do this, or that organisation says we can't do this. And so they just play everything both ways. They figure out how the systems work in the government so that they can find the holes to then put on a show to the government but still do what they want to do.
A person still part of Gloriavale comments.
I think if the pressure went off tomorrow, they would come back with an overwhelming flood and crush people that have embraced the changes. You've got multi-agencies wanting to change, and we've got a group of people within the community saying we don't want change. And then we've got a small group saying, I'll take any change you've got, whether it's a living situation, or schooling situation, or transport situation, or anything which relates to independence or autonomy. And there will be another group in the community who will be thinking, I don't want to change because I know that the change is going to be temporary, and that the backlash when the temporary change comes to an end is going to be far worse. And I don't want to be part of those people that have embraced change. They don't have a voice. Who are they going to talk to?
A former member agrees.
I could almost guarantee you some of the changes that have been made would revert back to what they were.
A current member issues a challenge to the government.
There have been some changes and things have improved, but they are going to have to start doing something more soon. Everybody needs to be paid properly, and have complete control of their own money, because I think it's fair that everybody is paid for services. The hardcore brainwashed ones, they're not going to leave the community. The thing is, you've got plenty of people here that still have got the cult mentality of it's the world against us. It's them trying to destroy the true church, and this is our way of life, and they are completely wrapped up in that, so they don't want to leave.
Here's former member Virginia Courage.
They're talking about the fact that they know that there's harm being done. They've had court cases that have proved it. They've had people taken off to prison. And yet, somehow, Gloriavale's allowed to slowly process a change. where else in the world would you be allowed to just slowly change? If you've done wrong, you've done wrong.
Let's pause here and have a chat with the girls. All right. Whew. What do you reckon, ladies? Any thoughts?
Well, as per usual, I'm struck by the eloquence of the voices from the Leavers that absolutely blow out of the water the archetype that people in cults are, all those horrible archetypes about not being very clever, or like that. These people have got they've got deep understanding of the issues, and they have got deep reflective abilities and incredible insights. And it's moving to hear what they have to say and their disappointment. That's really quite moving for me.
Yeah. And later on, as we listen, one of them says, "Where were you when I was a child?" That's it. Yeah, I agree. They're really eloquent, smart, deep thinking people. And obviously when they come out, they're able to actually, let their neurons in their brain sort of fire up after getting some decent rest and sleep. They're able to recognize their minds have been repressed, and they've suffered through lack of education, but it's not lack of intelligence. They haven't been given opportunities that could have come their way. I agree.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. The different the Leavers were very quick to point up the difference in narratives between them as Leavers or people who are current members, mostly as well, as opposed, the narrative that they hold and their experiences is so different to the narrative that they're saying the leaders are giving. And it was sort of quite disturbing for me to hear them say that the words and the answers that the politicians were giving were the same as what the Gloriavale leadership team people are giving. That was disturbing for me, and it must be really disturbing for them to hear, for them to hear that and to feel that, because it's like, hang on, whose side is the government of our country on here?
Yeah, interesting.
It's a collaboration. It sounded like a collaboration
Yeah.
of foolery, a collaboration of foolery, of a charade.
That's incredible. You're right. It's a very strange collaboration, because currently the government has been sued by the Leavers for their failure to act in Gloriavale, against Gloriavale. And yet here they are having chummy meetings on how to get Gloriavale back on track. And yet we want the government to go in and enforce stuff like we do, but there's meetings and reports and obviously an intention to do something at some point. But like they said, it's been a year already. Very interesting.
It raises fascinating questions for me there too, because normally in any situation, obviously you normally need to work with the leadership, because in theory they hold positions of authority and influence and power. But it's pretty clear here that working with the leadership is not working. But the change is not happening fast enough. And like they were just saying, why is this process taking so long? Like if something's on fire, go and put the fire out. Don't just say it's a process. You do wonder, why is it so slow? Why is it still happening?
I think
Is there a failure to recognise the abusive power of the relationship between the leaders and the members?
Yeah.
The coercive nature of the relationship.
Yes.
Yeah, if you don't understand that and you believe what's the impression management that we're talking about, if you believe, Yet to Air, that show will be coming up in a later episode talking about impression management. It's the facade that an abuser puts on for their audience.
Yes.
But behind
the
curtain, we see there's actually something else going on.
Yeah.
So the government are rather foolishly, despite all of these experts going in, are collaborating with the ACT. And the bit that I'm asking is, what are the obstacles for the government to take real action, to actually enforce the crimes that are happening? What are those obstacles?
And clearly one of the obstacles is the people in there, their reluctance to talk and speak up and be honest and lay charges and say, yes, please go ahead, because they've been taught that it's don't take your brother to court. So they're actually trapped in the beliefs that have helped lead to, an abusive organisation now mean that the accountability doesn't come easily for the groups. I love you mentioned an episode that we do have coming up about an organisation in crisis, and Dr. Wade Mullen wrote a book called Something's Not Right. And every day I find something out of this book I can share. And he said that demonstrations of change and goodwill are a common tactic for any offending party, and particularly when they've been caught out. And he says demonstrations are used to win your favour. And because they appear good, you naturally want to believe they're free from hidden agendas. And because you've likely been through a difficult process, it will be tempting to welcome and support a demonstration that signals a new beginning. So they're saying the Gloriavale leadership promising that change is coming encourages the people who are living there, and they want to believe that. And he said, though, I want to encourage you to remain discerning and willing to confront abuse so you do not fall for the final ploy. He said it can be one of the most difficult steps in the process of an organisation in crisis. And you've got government and groups thinking they're going in good faith to have negotiations and discussions with a group who has no concept of what good faith looks like. And so, the question is, you're talking to the people. These guys are under active police investigation for servitude, forced labour and slavery. And so, there's some massive questions here that need to be asked and answered. And I don't know that they can use the excuse anymore, the government, that they didn't know about coercion and manipulation, because I can assure you there have been massive attempts to help them understand. And if you just read through the court transcripts, how come we all get it? The New Zealand public gets it. The media gets it. So I don't think the government can use that as an excuse anymore. I think they know. But what are those barriers? Well, one has to wonder.
I can't help, every time I hear about this, I can't help but think about roughly 1992, New Zealand, North Shore, Auckland, Centre Point, harping back to that old bit of our history. And, all of these people were in jail. There was media everywhere about what had happened to Centre Point. The leader, or most of the leadership were in jail or were getting in jail, but it actually took another 8 or so years before the community was closed down by a group of, how many was it? I think it was 50 ex-members. They were all really concerned about what was going on in there. And I think about 40 former children, so they were now adults. Yeah. So it wasn't a government action. It was a large group, just like the group that we've just seen sharing their little stories about their own personal response to these events. But it took 8 years. Eight years.
That's fascinating, Kaz. I didn't realise that about Centre Point. I think the narrative in my head was that the police had gone in there and shut it down.
No,
so
those
interesting.
Those raids were 1989, 1990. And a lot of people left after that all happened because they wanted to wash their hands of it, and it was like, they were like really shocked by what had happened, and they left and they got out of there, and I think the community itself shrunk markedly. And you could say that it was a different kind of community in the 1990s compared to the 1980s, but it was still happening. The abuse and harm was happening. It just looked different. And I have had communication from people who were children and teenagers in the 1990s. So after all of the trials in 1989, 1990, 91, 92, those 3 or 4 years where all those trials, the sexual abuse of children, the drug trials, all happened, and they have communicated to me that they were actually having sexual contact with adults. It just was hidden. It was behind closed doors. It was kind of weird contact. They didn't quite know what it meant, but it was happening. So, it wasn't this overt sexual abuse that was happening in the 1980s prior to all the convictions, right in front of you. You could see it as you walk past the showers. It was something different. So it all went underground after all of the media attention. And in the end, was it the government that shut down Centre Point? No.
Yeah, it is a deep concern, and Leavers are very aware that unless thinking patterns change, how can you expect the community to just become healthy? And this is the thing, you can put on a great facade that everything's okay now. Well, actually, no, it's not okay. And as we're going to keep watching, you're going to hear from some Leavers saying you can change everything physical about Gloriavale, but you haven't changed the heart. You know,
yeah,
the
like
heart of the people.
That guy said, I think he said, it was quite a good little line, something about they might have had a facelift, but they're still a cult at heart.
Yep.
Yeah, or
you can't see what's wrong with the cult while you're in it. It's had a facelift, but it's still a cult. And I think some people think, well, we can do a few things. You can just move some people into their own housing and give people their money, and that will solve all of Gloriavale's issues. No, it won't. No, it won't.
Yeah, people still don't have autonomy and freedom, and they're still afraid.
Yeah, fear
and the
reigns.
agenda is still goes counter. It's counter to individuals having a life that is their best life. It's counter to that. It's the opposite. It's the cult leaders and the organisation getting their needs met and getting what they need. So the agenda is opposite.
And their needs met is continuing to hold on to power, because that's the way you have a better life in Gloriavale. You get to make decisions. No, they're not in castles. They haven't got yachts and expensive vehicles, and the average pleb in there doesn't. No, that's not their currency. You know, they have eternal security and they get to dominate people. You know, that's their currency. Get to make decisions. Lindy, I wondered how you felt when they talked about the people inside Gloriavale saying, oh, it's just the world against us and they're trying to destroy the church. Did that sound like an exclusive brethren throwback?
Yeah, I think lots of persecuted groups, or persecuted religious groups in particular, do have that mentality of it's us against the world. Definitely heard that a lot. And yeah, it's really tricky, isn't it? Because who gets to define which perspective is accurate or which perspective is reality for these groups that is extremely real to them? They've built their lives on it, and of course they, in some sense, under religious freedom, they have a right to hold certain religious beliefs. But as we discuss time and time again, religious freedom it's not an excuse to just trample over all sorts of other human rights and freedoms either. And I guess that's really the crux of what we're saying here, right? Is that, they might have some religious freedoms, but they don't. That doesn't mean that they've got a free pass to all kinds of other human rights abuses. But I guess, that's the tricky thing we're narrowing in on, I suppose, that the government is, it seems, totally incompetent to be able to deal with, is trying to educate them or change their worldview on what is a human rights abuse and what isn't, because under their worldview it's perfectly acceptable to treat people like slaves.
They don't believe in human rights. They admitted it in the court case.
Yeah.
Oh well, shall we continue in? Let's see what else comes out of the woodwork, huh? Here we go.
Fantastic.
Rebecca Wright from The Nation continues to question the Associate Minister for Workplace Relations.
It's taken already a year. This is child labour exploitation abuse that we're talking about.
As I've said as well, there are employment court rulings. There's the latest ruling that shows that the women who took the case were not volunteers, they are employers. We are waiting for the other part of that ruling as well, in terms of who then is the employer.
Gloriavale leaver Serena Pilgrim comments.
And it just makes me so upset to know that people, what we did is sort of, at the moment, is all for nothing. Just hurry up and bring the change that needs to happen, and stop putting it all off because you think you're better than the government or you're better than everyone else in New Zealand.
Former members Virginia and David Courage speak.
She's inserting the government into the fact that they've been involved in some way with these court cases, whereas actually the first defendant in our case is the government, is her. Because it's massive failure across decades. They've ignored the problem. They let the original overseeing shepherd go back after he'd been imprisoned. That should have never happened. They let him return to Gloriavale and be in control again. And they've been duped again and again and again. Each government department has taken their turn, whether it's been ERO or charity services or now the employment agencies. You know, it just goes on and on and on.
Without knowing the employer, you should still be enforcing basic employment rights.
Back to the Associate Minister.
But as I mentioned, there is a fair bit of work. There are support services there in place as well for anyone who does report abuse to be able to be dealt with.
But you know as well as I do that this is a community built on power and control. And for people to report abuse from within that community is extremely rare. It's only when they usually get out.
Gloriavale leaver Hopeful Disciple comments.
Well, the facts of the matter is people in Gloriavale still do not have the freedom to voice how they are feeling about situations. So there will still be people who are working in situations that they are not happy with and they haven't got a choice in.
Virginia Courage identifies the heart of the problem.
The women still are not having the choices. Someone else is deciding their life. And this is the issue we've got. The leaders are in control of people. If you are in control of people, you have got slaves. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you for actually getting the issue and making these politicians squirm, because they need to, because they have failed. She gets it. She gets the issues that are underlying all the policies and the government departments. It's the fact that there's power and control and coercion. A lot of people, and particularly agencies, want to just focus on the sexual abuse issue, but it's so much deeper than that. It's the coercion, it's the power of balance, it's the control. So it's not just that people can't report abuse.
Gloriavale leaver Melody Pilgrim speaks honestly.
There's no way for a child to report abuse in Gloriavale. They are trained to obey, to be quiet, to be still. There's no way that a child is going to approach an outside person or even an inside person in Gloriavale and tell them that they're being abused. They've been trained their whole life not to speak up about what's happening to them. They've been trained and told that suffering's good for them. How is a child even going to utter the words? The whole place is run on fear. Like, everyone's afraid to speak up. Everyone's afraid, if I do this, someone's watching. Someone's always watching me. How am I going to act? How am I going to speak? Everyone's going to be watching you. If you even try and go and talk to someone, if you're even brave enough to approach OT or the social workers in there, you know, who's going to be watching you? And it's very, it's almost like a concentration camp of fear, where these people are just getting put down, and in the name of God. And everything that they preach is actually against what God is. Yeah, so I'm just like, politicians, ministers, get up and do something.
Virginia Courage talks about getting support.
Maybe 1 or 2% of the people get that support. Most won't, because there's layers and layers and layers that are preventing them. They're trapped in their minds. They're trapped psychologically. They're trapped spiritually by what they've been taught. And they're conditioned. So many of them don't even know what abuse looks like. They don't know what abusive language is. They don't know what abusive behaviour is. And because most of them have suffered extreme trauma in multiple aspects of their life, they shut down when they see it. They turn their eyes, they walk away, because they can't do anything.
So I suppose what I'm asking you is, can you guarantee New Zealanders that the 350 children who are in Gloriavale right now are safe?
We are absolutely working on that.
But that's not a guarantee.
Virginia Courage picks up on that political dodge.
She didn't answer that.
Former member Melody Pilgrim tells everyone what she's thinking.
I'm really fed up with the attitude toward it. I'm just like, I'm over it with you guys. If you don't want to do anything, step aside and let someone else who's going to do something. It's still not enough.
Former member Serena Pilgrim comments.
We now automatically know straight away that children in there aren't safe because they've appealed, which means they've put things on hold already, and the change that needs to happen hasn't happened yet, and it doesn't happen until the government and the whole of New Zealand clamps down on them and says you have to bring change.
A current resident is disturbed by the minister's comments.
It's really sad and at the same time maddening that they actually believe it is safe and enough appropriate changes have and are taking place. They have absolutely no idea. It's petrifying to even think of standing up to those guys and just telling them that yes, we do want change. The people want change. Howard and now Stephen are always saying we need to change, but it's going to be a long, slow process because the people aren't ready for change. The people do want change and they want it yesterday. We feel so excited and then disappointed every time they say we need to have some big changes because they don't happen. They never happen.
Former member Victory Disciple talks about the impact of being let down.
When we lived in there and we were heard about government agencies coming in, there would be this rise of hope that maybe they would validate what we were living in as bad and wrong. And every time they didn't, it just enslaved us more to the system because we felt like, well, if they don't see this as wrong, we can't complain about it anymore because we already aren't being listened to by the people that are in control of us. So it kind of leaves you really powerless and disappointed, and you just lose your will to live and hope and dream.
Virginia Courage is still upset with the charity services for letting them down.
When charity services turned up in 2017, I remember thinking, wow, this is going to help revolutionise this place. This is going to get us back on track. This is going to get some really deep issues across decades in order, and nothing happened. And then I find out that basically Gloriavale could write some policies and sign off that they were going to keep them, and charity services were happy and off they trotted. Pathetic. Nothing in our life changed. In fact, it probably got a little worse. And while we're in there, the leaders are beating on the people emotionally, verbally. Don't you ask for an easy life? Don't you go trying to find some way that's a bit easier on your flesh? The road to heaven's paved with suffering. Your life should be difficult. Your life should be hard. Today. And they still teach that today.
Former members Victory and Hopeful Disciple contribute some more.
I would be really disgusted with the government if they're going to take this stance that it's all fine and they're not going to do anything about it, because when, as somebody living in Gloriavale, you are constrained by all these religious beliefs that you can't actually do anything about your situation without kind of giving up your faith, so to speak. But for the government to come in and actually force some changes is a lot more painless way of it happening.
It's really sad that they can go into an institution that has worked the way it's worked for 50 years. There's been court cases against offenders and it's still carried on. And they think that they're seeing the reality. They don't see it. We've been trained our whole lives to not let outsiders see the reality. So I don't care if they're there 2 hours every day of the week. They are not going to see what is actually really going on in people's minds, hearts and lives.
Let's head back for a chat.
that little segment was really quite moving for me. There was a number of such heartfelt, grueling statements, really, that just really moved me. Particularly the comments by Virginia in Victory about choice, about exposing how the community is built on power and control, and how Rebecca, the interviewer, seemed to really, she nailed straight in on that. She got in to the woman who we've just been listening to,
head of
the minister,
workplace relations, MBIE, effectively.
Yeah, that woman we've just been hearing clips from her. Like the complete lack of understanding of power and control, and what that actually looks like. I think that was so moving to me, to see the leavers or the members actually just nailed that. Like, this is what it looks like when people are controlled. They don't speak the truth. They're afraid. They play the game. They don't volunteer reality because it's too psychologically risky for them to do that.
That's right. We saw it in the court case. It was like, what planet are you on? Like, some of the people from inside Gloriavale who sat there and just said the most ridiculous things that even people in Gloriavale knew weren't true. And I think there was a comment. David Steadfast was one who was just on another place, and one of the leavers had commented in the court case, he's got this utopian view. This is his view of utopia. He actually thinks like this, which is,
I found it fascinating. One of the leavers said that an outsider or a politician or something could go and visit Gloria every single day and they'd still never see the realities.
Yep.
I found that super fascinating because I believe that I saw some of that growing up too, around presenting a certain narrative or image to outsiders about what life was like. And I think the person used a statement around we were trained to present a certain view to outsiders, which I thought was so fascinating. And I think sometimes these people don't quite realize the extent of how important it is to those who are members of these groups to be on the defense against outsiders and to be doing the impression management with them. So what you see is not what's actually there.
No, and so
well, I was speaking to someone just today, because I've been doing some conversations with some people involved with on the outskirts of Gloriavale, and asking them about their experiences with Gloria. So not members, but people in the West Coast community. Someone just said to me today how their initial impressions as an outsider going into Gloriavale was of that it felt really lovely, and they felt really looked after and cared for. And I said, sounds like you were love bombed. And they said, yes, I felt quite seduced.
Yes.
And they actually recognised that in this relationship, this ongoing relationship they were having with the community, that there was this seductive, like love bombing. I said love bombing, and they said yes, they were love bombing me.
And Faithful Christian was he was great at hospitality. Had a leaver here just yesterday saying he was amazing at it,
Yeah. So it's very much, it's an intentional thing. It just reminds me of Centrepoint, how Centrepoint used to have an open day where they absolutely put on a show, and they had fashion shows, and you could go around and look at all the different, because they were a very creative community, and they had a clothing area and a pottery, and they made all this different craft stuff, and you could go around and see it. And sometimes there'd be a fashion show, and the children will be running around and having this wholesome outdoor kind of commune living, and it was this beautiful thing, and my family was hooked in. It looked wonderful. But so like that, they're trained. People are trained.
Absolutely.
And when anyone's looking and coming inside with a microscope, absolutely, the leaders make sure they're around to watch and control what's said.
Yeah, and they don't even need to be around anymore. People in there know that's too risky. It's called a risk assessment. I think that's a phrase I've really picked up on. Another concept that perturbs me is everyone's ability to skirt around the concept of what safety looks like in a group like this. Because the question was, are the children safe? And so one politician wants to focus in on, well, are they being exploited for labour? No, well, we're doing some work in this area. But another politician says, are they safe? And they're like, well, we've gone in and we've run some sexual abuse sort of, workshops, how to recognise it and how to speak to people. But what they don't realise is that safety, it's more than just sexual safety. It's more than just even physical safety. It's about emotional and psychological and mental safety. And so if you ask a question, are the children in Gloriavale safe? Leavers will say, absolutely not. Yes, you could lock up all of the sexual offenders. You could stop them being spanked and hit. You can, make sure they're working decent hours. It's still not safe, they would say, because the thinking is not safe. The people don't even know.
That was really interesting. I think Virginia said it's not just about sexual abuse. No. It's about power and control and all these other dynamics. And someone else said there's that additional layer of the religious thing of someone said it's all done in the name of God. So it's got this extra power.
Yeah, weaponized faith.
Yeah.
Well,
it broke my heart to hear them talk about the little kids saying that there's just no way that kids would ask for help or even name that abuse is going on, because that you're not supposed to talk or tell about that, and if suffering or discomfort is again supposed to be part of your faith or your pathway to heaven, then there's this whole psychological mentality thing going on. But I guess the question is, what do you do about that? What can the government do about that?
Well, part two. So part two of our podcast, we will be airing that a week from now. And that's actually some of the big part of the question, what can the government do? And Calvin Davis from Oranga Tamariki is very happy to tell us very quickly what they can't do. And it was actually quite alarming and quite disturbing. It gave us a little bit of insight into what the government is thinking about. Before we head off and finish up this episode so we can get on to the next one, there was just something about that concept of change as a process. And Wade Mullen's book says that's what abusive organisations always say. It's like their catchphrase. They say, be patient with us, change takes time. But all it does is gives them time to wrangle another layer of deception into the story. And that's what's happening. Gloriavale is just holding out and holding out and holding out, mouse bite pieces at a time, a little bit here, a little bit there, saying, it'll take time. Meanwhile, how many years are we? We're 5 years down the track. We're from the original Charities Services report where they wrote a few bits of paper and got a pass on it. And this is just too many years. There's been too much damage done. And actually, change doesn't need to be a process, because if you're sorry for what you've done, an apology can be instantaneous and people will know it. What was it? Like a clap of thunder, like a lightning strike. People know when there's a genuine heart change. And I can tell you, nobody's convinced about that yet with Gloriavale. Oh well, shall we wrap up part one of our of this and encourage people to come on back for another round? Make sure you share this video with officials, MPs. We are calling for a Royal Commission of Inquiry into Gloriavale and also into government failures. So, our challenge to everyone is, MPs, what will you do for the children at Gloriavale? Will you be the one to make an impact on the next generation?
Yeah, so if you've enjoyed today's episode, please keep listening to more episodes of Cult Chat on Plains FM or on your favourite podcast platform. Please tell your friends about the show and leave a review on our Facebook page so our message can spread further throughout the cultiverse.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you all for part two soon.
Ka kite anō.
If anything in today's episode was upsetting for you and you'd like to talk to somebody, free call or text 1737 for support from a trained counsellor. Or visit the resources section on the New Zealand Olive Leaf Network website for a range of resources that might be of interest and use to you. The views, thoughts and opinions expressed in this podcast are the speakers alone, and Cult Chat does not necessarily share or endorse them.